On June 3rd, 1989, the Tiananmen Square massacre began. Initially sparked by the death of pro-reform General Secretary Hu Yaobang, the Tiananmen Square protests were primarily student-led, pro-democracy demonstrations held in the city square of Beijing. The largest goals of the protests were for democracy and freedom of the press and speech, among other forms of democratic freedom hindered by the Chinese Communist Party. The implementation of hunger strikes generated tremendous national support for the protests, which spread to over 400 cities across the nation. On May 20th, the State Council imposed martial law in a bid to suppress the protests and restore order. With negotiations between the state and the protesters failing, military action was imposed. On June 3rd, 1989, the 38th Army, led by interim commander Zhang Meiyuan, advanced toward Tiananmen Square, encountering heavy protest resistance along the way. As confrontations between military forces and civilian protesters mounted, army soldiers began to open fire on the crowds. The exact death toll of the Tiananmen Square massacre is unknown, ranging from the hundreds to the thousands. The events of the massacre were followed by increased suppression of similar protests across China, increased government control over domestic and foreign media in China, and an abrupt halt to the political reforms and liberation movements of the 1980s, setting lasting limitations on political expression. The events of the protests were covered by international media, and additional protests followed the massacre, including the now world-famous Tank Man incident, in which an unknown citizen stood before a garrison of tanks. To date, the Tiananmen Square massacre is one of the most censored topics in China.